So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today. This speaker probably really needs no introduction, but somehow I don't think she would think that's good enough. So I'm going to introduce her anyway. Dr. Sue has been a longtime member and friend of this center. She was, in fact, the spiritual director here for some 14 years. She has been around the science of mind circles for many years, having run a center, I believe, in Edmonton, Alberta, also having done ministry in Hawaii. She has been around the block and around the world with this teaching, and we are very blessed to have her here. She is our Minister Emeritus here at the Center for Spiritual Living, Westlake Village. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Sue Rubin.
So are you impressed yet? Wow. Of course, of course. Happy Hanukkah. Merry Christmas. And all that's well and fine and good and special and unique and wonderful. But if we're not embodying it and feeling it and living it, just so many of the things that Kelly referred to. So then what's it all about, Alfie? So, you caused me to think of former Christmases because I was tossing out a lot of old papers. Anybody have any old notes, papers, information? Well, get rid of it. I mean, that's not your salvation. All that you're looking for is within yourself. So lo and behold, I came upon the very first program of the very first candlelight Christmas service I did in Edmonton on December 22nd, 1985. And it was pretty sparse because did I know what I was doing? Hell no. It's like someone said, you want to be a minister? Well, the only place we have available is Edmonton, Canada, so go, which I did. And so it was pretty makeshift. And yet it contained the basic element of what is it that we really celebrate. So let's start with where it all started, which preceded Christmas, and that was Hanukkah. And as you can see, the one center candle, there's nothing like a real menorah, let's face it, where you get to light the candle. That middle guy, that's the shamus. And that's the lead candle, and on a candle where you're regularly lighting every night, that is the candle from which all other candles are lit. And so let's see if it's still there. So before you would even start the lighting, which would have been last night, you would be saying, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu v'tzivanu Baruch v'tzivanu Lahadlik Ner Shel, help me out here guys, Lahadlik Ner Shel Hanukkah. And it would simply be an affirmation that the Lord God of the universe was indeed being thanked for the opportunity to be who we are and where we are. I am definitely embellishing upon the way it was originally, but it was truly just a statement of appreciation. And then from that point on, you would take the shamus, the lead, and you would light that first candle, and always from left to right, and then say your additional prayers. And there's one prayer that translates in English to thank you, Lord of the universe, for seeing us through thick and thin. Now, if that doesn't apply today as much as it did way back then, I don't know what does. And so last night was Christmas Eve. And I don't think you could ever guess what I was doing about 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock last night. What do you think I was doing? Oh, cooking? Never. No. Wrong. What else? No. I was watching Pope Francis. Anybody ever watch that? I mean, it's gorgeous from St. from the Basilica, St. Peter's. Oh my Lord, there's just something about it. And what particularly captured me was his homily. And I definitely have converted it, but the basic message was that Pope Francis was asking all of us to challenge ourselves to be that which represents the Christ consciousness, that which represents that which was born that night in the very mundane and basic premise of the birth of something new within us. And so if you and I took that as our message for Hanukkah, what did Hanukkah really commemorate? It commemorated the bondage of the Hebrew nation at that time and living under the oppression of what had been imposed upon him, which were the Greek idols. And so everything about their precious temple was being defamed. And there was all kinds of worship and restrictions and persecution that was placed upon the Jews until one person, and his name was Judah Maccabee, rounded up all of his family members and a relatively small group of people and decided that this was no longer acceptable. That although the people were being asked to abide by and be obedient to the king's rulings and restrictions, that he was taking a stand for listening instead to God, to the source of all life, and being attentive to that would then initiate actions that would provide freedom. And sure enough, this band of small but mighty warriors decided that they could overthrow this rigidity and persecution, and they did. And they reclaimed their temple in Judea and came to find out in the cleaning up of the temple and in the desire to rededicate it to God, not to a king, not to an external force that was imposing physical restrictions, but rather to live from that place of the indwelling truth. They found they only had enough oil for one night. And there was the dilemma. And the interesting thing is that Hanukkah is celebrated because the oil that indeed was lit to that one cruse of oil that was available lasted for 7 more nights. And that's why the celebration of Hanukkah for 8 nights and all the delicious symbolism of potato pancakes and dreidels that spin, that little gambling game, and so many opportunities to really perceive this as what it is, a festival of lights. But the interesting thing is that technically, the oil burned for 7 nights, and the question becomes, well, why is Hanukkah celebrated for 8 nights? And the answer is, I'm going to give you the answer, as best I understand it, because on that very first action step that was taken in faith to light that first and only candle, that was the measure of everything that expanded. It's the same principle that applied when Jesus took the one loaf and the one fish, and in having the child bless it, it became that which fed the thousands, fed the multitudes. So in your world and in my world, it's the step we take without knowing exactly how it's all going to evolve. It's the step we take in however we feel about the circumstances that have provided ourselves locally and governmentally and globally, with everything that represents a deeper call to light that one candle and to know it is in and of itself sufficient to be a catalyst for everything that emerges. So in the evolution of yourself and myself, as the fuller expression of who we are, I have a question that's been playing in my mind, and I offer it to you. At this point in time, where it's no accident, this hasn't occurred, this simultaneous exact timing of Hanukkah and Christmas. I don't think it has happened since the last time was 1978. But what more poignant and perfect time in which to come into a sense of unity, so that regardless of how you feel about what's going on politically, economically, financially, and in the world where people have no home, where there is this refugee crisis, all of it is not meant for further antagonism or criticism or condemnation. It's meant in order for us to stimulate a deeper sense of who and what we are, so that we can bring something to the table we have as yet not brought to the table. So that's very ethereal, and that's very broad, and that's maybe very apart from what's going on in your life and in my life. But what is available is a personal question that will serve as an activity that takes us out into the world in a bigger way, is to look at our lives and ask, what is there in my life now that is forcing me to go deeper? What is there in my life that is forcing me to go deeper? To look at in a way of greater clarity, in a way of greater realization. Maybe it's about your health. In Science of Mind and in all of the metaphysical teachings, we no longer can excuse the outer by blaming the outer. So we no longer can blame mom and dad. If they hadn't treated me this way, I wouldn't be the way I am. But it's true, you didn't know my mom and dad. No, just kidding. It's just too easy to always look. Oh, look, you know what I just found? Digress. Hanukkah gelt. I should be biting this and seeing if it's the real thing. It's too easy to look far afield from where we are to discover who we are and where we are and how we're being in our world. So if indeed there are health challenges, that metaphysical principle says there is nothing that happens to me, it happens through me. That's something known or unknown, not for blame, not for antagonism, not for ridicule or derisiveness, but something about the way I'm believing, the way I'm living, the way I am feeling toward myself, toward others, the whole issue of forgiveness. It's not a one-shot deal. I don't think a day goes by that there is not something that calls us to forgive ourselves and to forgive others, and to come to that point of reconciliation. So what is it in my life that's forcing me to take a deeper look? Health, okay. All of those avenues that we look at. What about areas of my own still holding on to old angers or regrets or remorse or antagonism or that harshness or the rigidity with it which I'm not willing to grow? Right here where we are on the turf we occupy and how we live our lives every day is exactly the call to being less judgmental. Anybody judge anything or anybody? No, but our relatives and friends do that, don't they? Yes, a lot. So in the realization that, okay, maybe it's my body is telling me something. Body is not a separate part that's not behaving or functioning adequately or effectively. It's us. It's something about our way of living and relating and perceiving and being. I was watching Barbara Marx Hubbard. Anybody ever watched the works of Barbara? Well, Barbara and a Jewish gentleman, a rabbi named Gaffney have created something they call Evolutionary Church. Anybody seen that? And it's on every Saturday morning. And you use it by being on Zoom. And at Evolutionary Church, they flip back and forth so that wherever Mark happens to be, he'll give his portion of it. And he was and then Barbara will do it from where she presently is. And the opportunity is that, you know, in the new wave of integral spirituality and in the new craze about where are the millennials, we want the millennials, those 18 to 34ers, we want them here. And they don't do church the way it was done. We can't do it that way anymore. And so Mark and Barbara have decided that, yeah, you do church, but you do it in a way that challenges people, just as Pope Francis was saying, challenges people to go beyond where they've been before and to start walking from a position that is not so self-preoccupied and self-absorbed, that somehow I can see beyond what I need, what I want, what you need to bring to me to make me happier. You know, it's no longer about what can you give me. It's now what am I giving from? How am I giving from an awareness that I am that Maccabee which stood up and said, no more, I declare freedom. Freedom of my inner being to declare its adept capacity to maintain oneness with God. That's where I take my instruction and my guidance and my direction. That's where, although I only have enough to light my flame today, I can light that one flame today, and I guarantee that will take me to tomorrow. And once I'm in tomorrow, I start getting onto the idea of spiritual practices which continue to kindle that, and tomorrow takes me to the next tomorrow. There used to be an old saying about faith, and it had to do with describing that some people are standing at the edge. Anybody who knows the author of that, just shout it out. Remember, I stood at the edge, is Apollinaire was who wrote it, and he said, I stood at the edge, and I was afraid to take that leap out of that place. And I was continually encouraged to take that move, go beyond what you're presently looking at. And I was afraid. They said, go. I was afraid. Until finally, they pushed me, and I flew. And that's the principle, that you don't, and I don't, get to experience the greater measure of our own creativity, our own courage, our own strength, and our own capacity to love and be loved until we make the first step out and into that higher manifestation of spirit. And so if indeed there's something in my life that's already forcing me to take that step, again, maybe it's my body that's a little bit off kilter in some way. Maybe it's in my relationships. Why am I being rebuked? Why is everyone so short-tempered with me? Oh, really? Where am I rebuking myself, and where am I being impatient, inflexible, rigid in my own capacity to stand my own inner ground, while at the same time having the wonder of discovering who you are in the process? Or where is it in the line of work I do, whether I'm home or whether I'm out in life doing my unique whatever I do? Where is it that I feel stagnant? Where is it that I feel myself not fully living my potential to give all that I can give? I've said it a million times in over 30 years of ministry. But if you don't think I still contemplate, how did a nice Jewish girl raised in a middle-class family in New York who attended temple regularly under duress and strain, how did she get to be a minister of religious science? Who knew? And the fascinating part is, while I was growing up in New York, there was the Raymond Charles Barkers, and there were all of the teachers right downtown, and I was right uptown. But we cannot get to that point until we're willing to be that moment in eternity in which here I am, I'm available. I'm available to light that first flame that is the igniting, really, of faith, of everything that points to a more full, rich, and dynamic manifestation of who we are. In coming through the journey that Kelly so graciously provided, all of that would never have entered into my conscious mind as I was being that nice, obedient Jewish kid from New York who married on schedule, had my kids on schedule, even had the son before I had the daughter, 4 years apart. I mean, it was like I consulted the manual and I followed it. Who would ever have thought that at some point, the moment I deviated from what had been offered to me and provided as the rules for living, the moment I discarded that and started to tune in to what it really means to listen to that voice of infinite creative wisdom, all manner of things is exactly what emerges. So the challenge is this. I came upon this written by Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, who lived from 1749 to 1832. And he said, I have come to the frightening conclusion that I am the decisive element. It is my personal approach that creates the climate. It is my daily mood that makes the weather. I possess tremendous power to make life miserable or joyous. I can be a tool of torture or an instrument of inspiration. I can humiliate or humor, hurt or heal. In all situations, it is my response that decides whether a crisis is escalated or de-escalated, and a person is humanized or dehumanized. If we treat people as they are, we make them worse. If we treat people as they ought to be, we help them become what they are capable of becoming. So would you join with me in deepening the realization of the truth of being, and in declaring in the I am, in the nature of God, that perfect manifestation represented by Jesus the Christ, that which emerges within myself this very day is the freedom, the willingness, the invitation I extend to myself to be myself in the fullness and richness of my divine potential. In this very instant, I take this unity of light, wisdom, understanding, enlightenment, intelligence, and I more fully access its creative impulse to evolve more fully, more freely, and to more contribute to making the world around me a better place, which in tune with all that is makes this entire world and universe spin at a new vibration, at a new level of frequency, of energy, of light, life, love, truth, and beauty. So as I go about my business, I know it is God living its own idea of itself by means of me, that best offers myself and all what it looks like to be a transformed, individualized expression of spirit. I am open and receptive to being the I am that I am, fully conscious, fully aware of cooperating with the universal law of life that is forever prompting me upward, onward, and forward. As I examine what is it that is pressing up against me in health, in wealth, in creative expression, in my relationships, in my perception about people, what is it that this represents as something to impel me forward, forcing me to look more deeply at who I am and why I am here. So I see a new world, a new vision comes alive as I come more alive to the vision of all that God is, as me, as all, as everything about life, near and far, known and unknown. I accept new beginnings as the holiday season simply is my invitation to let my light burn ever so more brightly. I accept this for one and all, and in gratitude and acceptance let us all declare,